Okay, so we'll start now. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. My name is Susie Xue Jingzhen. So I'm an Assistant Director of the Asia Forest Research Center at UBC. So I'm responsible to coordinate the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Specialized Committee from Asia Pacific Young Scientists Association. So in short, AYSA, which is the organizer of today's webinar. So our ordinary chair of this specialized committee is Professor Jeff Sayer from Faculty of Forestry at UBC. And our executive chair is Professor Xuefei Yang from Kunming Institute of Botany, Chinese Academy of Sciences. So AYSA is an open platform aiming to help young scholars with their professional and also personal development and enhance the regional forest research collaborations, especially focus on the Asia Pacific region. So if you are interested in our activities, please visit our website and register as a member. So we will keep you updated. So I will post the link in the chat box later. So before starting, I want to inform everybody that the webinar will be recorded and the video for the webinar will be available on our website. So for better sound quality, please keep your microphones muted during the presentation. In the section of question and answer after the presentation, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions for our speaker, or you can also post your questions in the chat box if you prefer. So today our keynote speaker is Professor Dr. Yang Jun from Tsinghua University. So now let's invite Professor Guangyu Wang from our Asia Forest Research Center to introduce today's keynote speaker. Professor Wang, please.
Yeah, thank you, Susie. It's one of my great honor to introduce my my longtime friend, Professor Yang from Tsinghua University. I think we know each other for more than 10 years, right? It's such a long time. Professor Yang is a director of the Urban Ecology group at Tsinghua University. He got his PhD from UC Berkeley. And also, I know he was working at many universities in the US as an assistant professor and a research associate, such as Cornell University, Yale University, and also the Temple University. Dr. Yang was returned to China. Now he's mainly working on urban forestry, the human well-being, also use of remote sensing technique to do the urban ecology study. He was a very well-known scientist in China and also around the world. He published more than 100 peer-reviewed papers in the top journal. So he also is the IUCN member for a species monitoring group in the IUCN. So I will let the Dr. Yang to introduce himself and also his talk for tonight. Thank you, Dr. Yang, and thank you again for give us one of the keynote speech for this serial conference. We are looking forward to have your presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Guangyu. As you just mentioned, we are a long-term friend. And I'm always amazing, the efforts you spend to organize international colleagues to exchange ideas. I always think exchange ideas is key for the advance of science and also to promote the common good. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity here today to share my research And I hope get your inputs, and if anyone feel interested of this topic, we can probably start some long-term collaboration. So without further ado, I'm going to show my slides. Okay, so I hope everyone can see the slides properly. So today, I'm going to introduce a research project that we are currently doing. We are trying to look at how urbanization impact the global distribution of tree species. So why do we want to look at this topic? We certainly, everyone knows that we are in a era of urbanization. So people call 21st century urbanized century. So if we look at the projection of the urban population produced by the United Nations, we can see that this blue line is urban population in the world. It will keep rising. So by 2050, the urban population will be around 70% of the total global population. And for the red line, it's from the less developed regions. It will have a very high percentage of people living in the urban areas. So the green line is from the developed regions. So basically the percentage and the urban population will stay the same. So not only the urbanization causes the people move from the countryside to the cities, it also causes sorry, somebody raise a hand. Okay.
If we have question, we can ask later. Okay, after the presentation.
Okay, so
yeah.
All right, I just continue.
Yeah.
So not only for the growth of urban population, urbanization also caused the expansion of the urban areas, and that has consequence. As this paper shows, there are direct and indirect loss of natural areas result from the urban expansion. So between 1992 to 2015, you can see that the urbanization caused direct loss of the forest land, the shrubland, and the grassland. We tend to call those areas natural areas. But not only the direct loss, people also find that urbanization can cause the conversion of the cropland to the urban areas. And in order to compensate of the loss of the cropland, you need to convert other land into croplands, because most cities are built on those cropland with high qualities. So in terms to fill in the gap, you have to occupy more lands in other types of lands to compensate for the lost cropland. So directly you lost like 3.3 million hectares of forest, but indirectly you get like 5 times or even 10 times more land to compensate for the cropland occupied by urban areas. So just in order to give you a more direct impression of what this means, the urban expansion and the natural areas, I overlay the urban boundary by 2018 over those protected lands. So those red squares are urban boundaries in 2018, and all those green patches and also those green dots are protected areas generated by UNEP WCMC. So you can see there are lots of overlaps the urban boundary actually some are near the protected lands, or some are even inside the protected lands. So clearly, the urban expansion has caused problems to our natural area preservation. So what will happen if you change a place from other types of lands into urban areas? This diagram shows you the process, how species will lost from the urban land. So there are several processes. First, the habitat transformation. So originally, you may have forest land, agricultural land, and also some urban land. But you convert those forest land into urban land, and also those cropland into the urban land. And that caused fragmentation of the originally intact natural areas. And also you have those urban environment issues such as the air pollution, such as waste, that can get into natural areas. And some species cannot tolerate and get lost. And then you have the human preference. You want to keep certain species, for example, those with showy flowers, those with fruits, and you want to remove those species that you don't think it has values, or you want to intentionally introduce species from other areas. So that's going to replace the original species. So at the end, you have the loss of the species, but also you introduce those exotic species into the urban environment. So that's what happened at the land that has been converted to the urban areas. But at the global scales, we are not only concerned about what happened inside the urban area. We're also concerned about the species movement or migration over the entire landscape. At this time, the urban area can serve as barriers. What does that mean? For example, for trees, for certain trees, it will rely on gravity to disperse the seeds. If you have an urban area in between the suitable habitats for this species, the seeds may not be able to reach the suitable habitats, and the population will decline. This also happened to those species that rely on small animals, such as rodents, squirrels, to transport or disperse the seeds. For those small animals, the urban may become barriers to them. But at the same time, urban area can serve as a stepping stones. What that means, you introduce certain species into the urban area, for example, for the horticultural use, put in your garden. And later, those species escape from the city into the wild. And that makes the urban areas a stepping stones or a gate to the introduction of a species into the wild. So look at those joint impacts. The urban area can both prevent species dispersal and also can help the species to dispersal. We decided to choose the tree species as a study object to research those effects. So why do we choose tree species? Because trees are the key elements of the global ecosystem. We all know that trees can sequestrate carbon, and it can provide important habitats to other animals. And also, there are good data availability of tree species. So not only for the trees in the natural areas, but also for trees in the urban areas, there are good inventories. for tree species, as we see that urbanization can have a two-side effect, can both reduce the tree species or increase the tree species. But also at the end, I have to say that tree species or trees are always, make people, fascinating about them. So I just show you this picture, which is the latest record of the tallest tree in China. This is just released by May 18, 2022. Scientists from the Institute of Berkeley, Chinese Academy of Science, find this tree in Xizang province, which has a height of 83.2 meters. I hope this record can be break in the future. But just to show you how people care about trees. So we think with our research, we can generate some interest into the conservation of tree species at the global. So what we want to find out from this research, we ask a question: what are the impacts of urbanization on the global distribution of tree species? Basically, in order to answer this question, we need to figure out the two things. So first, what's the distribution of the tree species, both inside and outside of global urban areas? We need to know where they are. Second, we need to find ways to measure the impacts of urbanization on their distributions, because we cannot go to every city to do a survey to find out how the impacts are. So we have to find alternative ways to measure those impacts. So for the first question, to find out the distribution of tree species, both inside and outside of urban areas, people probably will immediately think of those big biodiversity database. For example, here I list the GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So you just need to input the species name, and you can see the distribution of this species or over the world. But well, that sounds easy, but there are some issues. For those reports of the species inside those biodiversity databases, they can have some quality issues. Not every record is in high quality. So those quality issues include 3 dimensions. So the taxonomy. So some species may have the wrong spelling, or they are uncertain taxonomy, or they are recorded in an old classification system. So you may not be able to find it. And also there have some space quality issues. That means the location of the report is not accurate, or it's wrong. For us, because we want to find out how urbanization impacts the distribution, we need to have high quality space location. And there are also another dimension, the time issue. Basically, you will have more records in the recent, you have less in the past. And also you have less, for those old records, it's less likely you'll be able to control or to correct the quality issues. So we cannot just query those big biodiversity database and then we use that for our study. We have to do some data cleaning work. So we develop a working flow. First, we develop a name list of all tree species in the world. And then we query not one, but many major biodiversity databases, because there are supplement to each other. And then we do the data cleaning work. And at the end, we figure out which is distributed inside the urban area, which are not. So first, we relies on the BGCI's global tree search tree list to develop our land list. So in 2017, BGCI released the first list of world trees. I think this is probably the first, agreed list of tree species in the world. At that time, there are about 60,000 tree species names in the first list. But recently, I checked, they reduced the number of species to about 58,000. So with a clear definition of trees and a agreed list of tree species, we used this list to find out what are those synonyms of those tree species. So we relies on the plant list, the catalog of life, and the tropicals and the GBIF to pull out the synonyms for those tree species. And we found synonyms for more than 35,000 species. And at the end, we have a name list of more than 239,000 unique names. The reason we want to develop this huge name list is we want to find out those records as many records as we can, because some of them are recorded in the standard scientific name, but some of them are recorded in the synonyms. So with this list, we can just pull out all of them. And later you're going to show this really help us. And we queried 8 major biodiversity databases. So they represent different regions over the world. So for the ALA, it's mainly focused on Australia, and also the global coverage, for example, like a BioTime or the GBIF. And also we pay special attention to Africa, we use a rainbow, and also to the Brazil, use a species link. So basically we use our name list to search through those databases and find out all those relevant records. Okay, so here is a very dry part of our data cleaning process. So firstly, we want to fix the taxonomic errors. We use the plant list as a reference. So we try to integrate all records and convert those names into the accepted scientific names in the plant list. So those are process. I probably just quickly go over it. So for any records that match the scientific names in the plant list, we just accept it. But if there's no match, we're trying to do some correction. Sometimes you have a punctuation that the program cannot recognize. So we remove the punctuation and say if there's a match. If not, we go to the next stage, and we trying to match the name of the genus and also the name of the species separately, because oftentimes that you use the synonyms or they don't have the intact authority, you're gonna have a mismatch. But we look at those components individually, and at the end we combine them together to get those matched species list. And for those records that match the plant list, we keep them. So after the correct for the taxonomic areas. We correct for the geographic areas. Basically, we look at those records with coordinates. Because if there's low coordinates, we cannot do much about it. So we look at whether they record those coordinates in a correct manner. For example, they may reverse the longitude with the latitude. Then you cannot correctly identify it in the map. And also there are records they are inside the ocean. And also there are records they say, well, it's from China, but the coordinates is not belonging to China. So for this kind of records, we have to fix the coordinates. So here I just show you an example. How do we fix the coordinates as with geographic areas. So at this side, the figure A, you can see those red dots. They are records with wrong geographic locations, or their coordinates are wrong. So you can see there are records inside ocean in the place where it's supposed not to be, and with some adjustment of their coordinates. Like for example, if you put a minus to the longitude, that means it's in the west hemisphere. You may fix it, or assembly, you put a minus in front of the latitude, you may fix it. So this is the figure B is the result after we use all those tricks to fix the wrong coordinates. You can see that all those records are correctly located in the place where they are recorded. And there are low records in the ocean or in the Arctic. So after querying the 8 major biodiversity database, and also conduct the cleaning work, we reduce more than 100 million records into 30 million, and with about 57,000 species. And then we separate those records with different quality. For example, here we only look at the quality of the space location. So you can see about 80% have high quality. And then we look at the taxonomy quality. About slightly more than 30% has a high taxonomic quality. And we look at them together, it's about 30%. They have high quality in both dimensions. So at the end, we got about 0.86 million high quality records, and that cover 22,000 species. This figure show you those records before we conduct the cleaning, and you can see lots of problem. And this is only show you the high quality records. You can see mostly are in US and also in South America and Europe and Australia, and also China and Africa, in the South Africa, East Africa. So how is our work compared to others? So we spend such a long time to develop those data cleaning protocol, and trying to clean the data as much as possible. So we compare our results to a work published in a slightly early time. So you can see that this study, they queried 5 major biodiverse database, and we use the 4 of them. And globally, they are able to identify 49,000 tree species. So we got like 57 57,000, so more than them. And also they have record total number of records that is 37 million. But they also say they have about 28 million duplicate records. So we get more because without a duplicate records, we have 30 million. And they at the end they have 6.4 million that could be considered as high quality, but we only get 0.86 million. So basically we use a more stringent standards because we are using our data to study the impact of urbanization. They are using the data to for the species distribution modeling, which will have less stringent requirements for the data quality. If we use for the species distribution modeling, we roughly have like 150,000 records that can be used for the species distribution modeling. Okay, so we have our good quality data, and how do we separate the species distributed inside the urban area and those non-urban area? We relies on the land cover maps. We got the land cover maps for the period between 1992 and 2018 from the European Space Agency, ESA. Basically, it's a 300-meter land cover map. It has a high quality and is consistent for the entire period. And use this land cover map, we extract out urban land class, and also we actually extract out cropland class for the comparison purpose. So this figure shows an example. We use the urban land class to tell which record is inside the urban and which is not in Goiânia, Brazil. So you can see this yellow part is urban land in 1992. Those green dots are record of tree species. So we consider those green dots in those yellow areas are actually records of the urban species. And for those green dots that is outside of the urban land class, we consider them records in the natural area. So this is the way we separate urban from non-urban for the entire globe. It's a little bit rough, but it actually serves our purpose to have a global view. And for the second part, we also want to supplement our urban tree species occurrence report because only use a biodiversity database, there's a problem. Most field surveys were conducted in natural areas. So there are not many records about urban tree species. But we know that for the city government, they maintain those inventories of urban tree species, and also for many studies, they look at the urban tree species. So we want to use those information from those reports and the literatures. So we try to mine those data from the literature. We use those search strings to search those major literature database, such as Web of Science, STOPS, and we extract out papers that study urban forest or urban plants between 1979 and 2018. And also we search through Google Scholar and also Google those city tree inventories, and we pull all those green literature, combine them with those literature from the literature database. And then we tried two types of extraction. So for those materials between 1979 and 2015, we do manual extraction. So basically, try and read through the paper and take out the records of the tree species and put them into the standard data form. But for the 2015 and 2018, we use both manual and automatic extraction because we realize it takes a long time to do the manual extraction. Actually, for the first part, one of my PhD students spent 3 years to complete it. So we try to play with those text mining techniques. So here is the flow chart. We request the API service from Elsevier, which basically have the most of papers we find. And we get the full text in XML format. And we run those text mining work, trying to identify papers which has the occurrence records of the tree species. And at this stage, in order to make sure we get a right paper, we run a manual inspection, and we find the results satisfied our requirements. So then we go ahead and use the automatic procedure to extract out species name and the place name, and then we use the geonames to convert those species names into locations, basically into coordinates, and finally automatically put them into a data form, which has the species name and also the coordinates of the place. So here is a result. We end up with this green part, our products. We call it Global Urban Tree Species Database, GUTS. So unfortunately, when we were working on this, there's a publication out in 2020, a little bit earlier than us. But we still, can see, the comparison of the data in our database and this published urban tree species database. So if we only look at, those records from the literature, we have records from 694 cities. But if we use both literature and also those from the database, well, we have records from more than 8,000 cities. So we got more records than the existing one. And with the data, we can go ahead to answer the second question, the impacts of urbanization on the tree species. So we look at this from the two sides. So how the urbanization impact the distribution of tree species in the area that has been developed into cities. So in the site that occupied by the urban area. And the second, we look at how it impacts the tree species in the areas around the city. So basically in the surrounding nature areas. So for the first one is pretty straightforward. We basically look at the land cover change, and then we overlay that with those tree species occurrence record, and we find out a place where the habitat has been converted into the urban areas. This is based on assumption that once a place, a natural habitat has been converted into an urban land class, the tree species cannot, form viable population, cannot continue to survive alone. So we consider as a loss. So these are results. If you look at the global results, you can see where the impact is most severe, in Brazil, in China, Australia, and also Mexico. So during this period, the number of species that are threatened by urbanization 12,000 species and happened in 150 nations and regions. So are these results reliable? We compare that to the state of the world trees 2021. Basically, this is an assessment on the tree species at a global by experts. So they released this in 2021, and they show that globally 17,000 species are threatened by human or are facing extinction risks. So ours are 12,000. So, but we are looking at this issue from two different angles. For the global tree assessment, they look at both all those threats, so agriculture, logging, and the livestock farming, and they only look at the urbanization here. That is ranked the fourth in all those courses. But interestingly, we find something that's not shown in this report. We find that there are about more than 6,700 tree species that were in the cropland, but are impacted by the urbanization by 2018. So what this means is for the regions or for the land classified as croplands, they still can keep some tree species, but once you convert them into the urban land, those species can no longer be there. So that shows the potential of the agroforestry. So you can have agricultural production, but they also have tree species conservation at the same time. So what are countries and the regions that are impacted by urbanization the most? It depends on what criteria you are using. So by percent of the records that has been lost to the urbanization, countries like Palestine, Lebanon, and the US Virgin Islands, they are actually ranked the top. That is because those countries, for example, for the Palestine, it only has a forest cover of 1.5%. So that means it doesn't have lots of records of tree species. Here, the urbanization impact, 3 records and 3 species, and that account to the 22% of all records in that country. So this is interesting because normally people, when people talk about tree species loss, people will look at those countries with abundant tree species, such as Brazil or China. But here we show that for those countries with very few tree species, even a slight impact can cause a huge impact on the total tree species they have. But in terms of a number of threatened species, this back to people will normally think. So the top is Brazil. It has more species will be impacted by the urbanization, and followed by China and Mexico. In terms of species impact by the urbanization the most, I just select a few examples here. So for example, for those classified as the least concern, Camellia fraterna in China, it actually lost 50% of the reports in the natural areas. I'm not sure should we consider as still a least concern, but also for the endangered species like Jingo biloba, the urbanization threat caused the loss of 17% of the records in the past 30 years. Also, there are places in the United States, they have species like Pinostoria ala, which is quite critically endangered, that lost like 10% of its records to the urbanization. So those are examples of species that are under threat by the urbanization. So we completed the first part. What are the impacts on those species at the place that has been converted to the urban lands? So here we try to answer the second part. What are impacts on species surrounding those developed areas? Because we cannot go there and directly observe it, so we try to set up a sequence of conditions. When a record satisfies those conditions, we consider that impacted by the urbanization. So the first, those areas, the areas must be a natural area, both in 1992 and 2018. So it's always a natural area, and there are species increase inside this area during this period, and also those species should not be species originally from the country or the region. We use the global tree search to do this judgment. And also the area should not be the naturalized area of the species. We use a global naturalized alien flora database to run this assessment. And the increased species should first appear in the city. So people imported into the city, and later it appeared in the later areas. And finally, we ask the climate of the area will be suitable for the species both currently and also in the future. So the species will persistent in the wild. It's not just a one-time escape, and it cannot establish itself. So it has to be able to establish the population in the wild. So how do we project the future, suitability or the future chance of establishment? We run the SDM model, the species distribution modeling. We use the climate data from the world climate and basically use two scenarios: the 4.5, which is a medium scenario, and the 8.5, which is a high emission scenario. Warmer, get warmer, and we look at the current and the 2050 and 2070. So basically, we run this analysis to 300 species. Those species later appeared in the natural area surrounding the city. We removed the species that has less than 30 records. So originally we found like 389 species, but we are only able to run modeling on the 300. So here is an example. We use Robinia, pseudoacacia as an example to show under those different scenarios, the stable areas and the place where it decrease and the place where it increase. And this is the result. So we found at the end with go through this conditions that there are 103 locations in 14 countries and involve 82 tree species that can be the species released from the urban into the natural environments, and also it is able to persistent here. And so there are a few examples. So like, for example, like in Brazil, the Artocarpus altilis are from the urban areas, and the potential source, those two cities, and they can be suitable for the future climate. There's 82 tree species is only based on the species records from the literature. If we combine the database, we found like 50 species in 35 countries. So here's a summary. In this work, we built a global tree database with 57,000 tree species. And also inside this tree database, there are about 10,000 tree species distributed in 8,500 cities. And we found that urbanization have impacted the habitats of 12,000 tree species in 151 countries and regions during 1992 and 2018. And also we found that urban areas might introduce 28 species into the natural areas. So what's the future work? So during our work, we found out that the species record, even though we tried, search 8 major databases, still the completeness of the records are not satisfying in some place. So those green parts are just with a high completeness of the records, and those yellow and red part, places where you have not complete coverage, but also for the countries like Russia and some Middle East countries, we don't have good records. And also for the future, here are some recent papers, and you can see that the future projections are very dramatic. So for example, for the first one, they expect, due to the urban land expansion to 2050, it can cause, impairment of 850 terrestrial vertebrates. This is huge. And the second one is even huger, that by 2100, it can cause like a loss of species, like 7 to 8 species per 10-kilometer scale. So those are for the animals, for the vertebrates. So what will happen to the tree species? It's interesting to answer, because trees are immobile. They're sessile, so they cannot move. They don't like those animals. They can escape from the urban land. It's harder for them to escape. So will the future urban expansion cause larger impacts or less? It's interesting to find out. So by conclusion, we can say with confidence that urbanization had impacted the global distribution of tree species. And the loss of the habitats is probably the most direct impact. But also it introduced the tree species into the new areas. And in the future, when we consider the conservation of tree species, we need to consider future urbanization. All right, so I have to thank people who are actually doing this work. So Pombo Yang, when I mentioned that, spent 3 years to manually extract out the tree species records. And also I want to thank all those database for generously sharing those species records, and also for people who contribute species records to this database. So without them, I cannot do this work. And also for the grant agencies for the support. All right, that's all I want to share with you, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Yang, for your interesting talk. So there's a lot of information. So now we'll open for the section of questions and answer. Probably I will take the advantage as a host. So I will ask the first question. So like, yeah, in your talk, you mentioned that urbanization have really a lot of negative effect on the tree species. I am wondering, so do you find out maybe do you think like, yeah, the urbanization like also have some effect like tree species, some tree species positively? Like maybe, you know, like people also, maybe they plant also species inside the city.
Well, Susie, you asked a good question. This actually touch a very key concept in conservation. Should we consider the original to protect the original, you know, flora or original, you know, habitats, or we just, you know, also look at, you know, the usefulness of the species to people. For people, you know, planting trees in cities, certainly they introduce lots of exotic species into a new place. To those strict conservation purpose, it may not be ideal because those exotic species, once they escape into the natural areas, they can compete with the native flora and cause, you know, damage to the native ecosystem. But for people living in cities, certainly they can use those exotic species for good. For example, some exotic species, such as the planet trees, they are very tolerant of air pollution. They are good, you know, street trees. If we can have a good conservation program to keep them in the city, and also to actively remove those, you know, escaped species in the wild, it may both satisfy our needs and also keep the, you know, the native place intact. So I think that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Yang. So now if you have questions, please unmute your microphone.
Hi, Dr. Yang. Hi. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I was particularly amazed by the workflow diagram you showed in the data cleaning process. That's a huge process. So I'm a first year PhD student at UBC, and my research topic is about projecting ecosystem climatic niche. So I have a question about the occurrence time of the tree species. So when I went to the tree species database like GBIF, there is a column in the data set says reporting time, right? And usually we just ignore this reporting time because we assume that the reporting time is irrelevant or not significantly correlated with the occurrence time. However, do you think it is a good idea, or is it like possible that we use this reporting time as some proxy of the occurrence time, and then maybe we can further loosen your assumption that once the urban land replace the natural habitat of the tree species, then individual trees can survive? Do you think it's possible?
Well, actually, that's a good question. When we do the data cleaning, we use, you know, the record time as a variable to remove those duplicated records. So that's one use. And secondly, we say when we consider the destruction of the species habitats and also the introduction of species into the natural environments, we also consider this record time because we have to match that with the land cover map. So if they both show in the same time and later they disappear, and we can see that, or this disappear from this place, or they increase later, show up later, and we see, well, we have an increase. So it's quite useful. And the only problem is like GBIF, they have very good records after 90 1960. So if you want to do, those climate projection, if you need a longer time records, it's very sparse. You cannot find many good quality records.
Yes, that's very important. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Yang. May I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks for your wonderful presentation, and I learned a lot. And also, my program is really similar to what you have done. I'm a UBC PhD program student right now. My program is about species distribution model, and then I will project the future distribution. And also, I wanna collect more data, more occurrence data about tree species. And I'm really interested in the first part you have done. Like you said, a workflow for cleansing like some error data. And I was wondering, like if in the first part, do you include every tree species occurrence data?
Yeah. So as I introduced at the beginning, so we're trying to get as many records as possible. So that's the reason we developed this, a large name list, contain more than 200,000 names. Yeah, every tree species, we can find from those major database we include them.
Is the data can be shareable? I mean, I was wondering the data. I think it might be very useful as for my research, and I was wondering if they can be shared.
Well, that's a very good question. So my answer is definitely yes. So I will publish the data once our paper is accepted. But before that, I will be very happy to share data with anyone who want to use it. As long as you contact me and write me an email, and I will send you the data.
Thank you very much. I will give you my message, and then and I will leave you my message. Another question is how you divide the data from urban area and the non-urban areas, like the current records. I think they might be general, and how you divide those current data from urban and non-urban areas.
Okay. Well, the occurrence record, certainly they only give you the locations. Some with very high precise coordinates, like precision up to 100 meters. So we use this information, and we also use the land cover map. The urban land cover map we use has a spatial resolution of 300 meters. So that is suitable for this purpose. So basically, if the data, the occurrence records fall into the urban land class, we will consider it as urban records. If it's in other lands, we consider it as non-urban records. So for the non-urban records, we only look at those places as considered as natural areas, such as forest and grassland and shrubland.
Yes, good. Yes, and yeah, I'm amazing, and I'm really happy to hear what you present, and really happy if we have chance to cooperate, and I can learn more details from you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I'm looking forward to for the collaboration. Yeah.
I have that. I would like to have one question though. It's a massive work to have the data mining, cleaning, all the thing you did is amazing. Also the research result is quite astonishing. I was thinking about the one thing for plantation. You were talking about urban, urban tree and non-tree, but a lot of plantation in most of the country was introduced from other countries, like poplar in China, eucalyptus in China. I think the dogwood fir was introduced to Europe. a lot of like Pinus radiata was from US, now it's popular in Australia. So what do you think about those kind of the plantation was introduced the species around the world? What kind of impact I need your comment on that though, for those
Yeah, I think that tree plantation should have a huge impact on the tree distribution globally. We didn't look into this issue because there are some very good research on this topic, because plantations are more easily to track than the urban tree species, because there are good records. You can just check the timber exports or imports, and you can see where those plantations are. And also there are good records in the FAO show you the plantations and the species used. But certainly, yeah, it causes huge impacts. And while the research mainly look at the direct impacts, so you import those species and put it there, and you replace the local species. There may be some indirect impacts that are worth to look. For example, if you use a plantation, you may save those primitive forests from being cutted. So those are some positive side. If you manage them and put them into restricted place, I think that has some positive side of it.
Yes, I think compared to the urban tree configuration, from 2002, I was visiting Washington, D.C., Professor Chow from Nanjing Forest University, he's doing the ginkgo biloba. He talked to me, whenever I go, I need to check where I can find the ginkgo biloba. So I almost go every city since 2002. I can find every single city in the world has a ginkgo biloba. In US, in UK, in wherever you go. So I think that's quite, one thing is you also help the ginkgo biloba, right? To preserve in this planet. But and also the beauty, a lot of the urban region, they can distribute in a really hot region and a really cold region as well. It's quite amazing species. Tony was trying to do some like a climate modeling to see if any suitable place that only suitable place for ginkgo biloba. But actually, after we're doing the research, we can find everywhere in this planet can survive, but not in the Atlantic region. So in those kind of species, right? What do you think about, like, I can see a lot of positive impact, but very difficult to find some negative impact. They never go to the forest. Never, like we have the UBC here, a lot of the ginkgo here, but it's very, I haven't seen any ginkgo in a while. So I don't know what is a lot of research that need to be done in the future to see how those species is not aggressive, but it's widely distributed species, how to best use of those species. Yeah.
Well, that's actually a good example of conservation, because ginkgo tree is everywhere. Nobody will think that ginkgo tree is actually classified as an endangered species in China. We are talking about the two types of provenance sources. So for those in the wild, it's endangered. But for those in the city, it has been widely distributed and produced in large quantity. But for the tree species, the ginkgo trees in the city, it may have a very narrow genetic diversity. So it may come from just a few trees from China, and then produced in the nurseries and then reproduce and distribute widely. So that's the reason we want to preserve or protect the wide population of ginkgo trees in China. So they're separate issue. So we protect it because we believe it contains those very diverse genetic resource we have in our use. But for the city, they probably mostly from several clones and we use again and again. It cannot represent the full genetic diverse spectrum of the species. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, is there more questions for Professor Yang?
Can I have a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, dear Professor Yang, thank you very much for your wonderful talk. And actually, I know you are a very famous expert in this field from your WeChat group or something like that. Yeah, so I feel very lucky to listen your lecture today. And I have several questions. And the first one is that, did you include the Herbarium specimen database in China? I noticed that you include many databases like the GBIF and the Rainbow and other database, but I found maybe you did not include the Chinese database.
That's a good question. In China, certainly the Herbarium records are a very valuable resource, and but unfortunately, it's not in the in the format as the GBIF or other database. It's kind of separated. We have done a work trying to download the records from the China Herbarium, in those digital platform, and trying to extract those locations and the time and the records from those records. We have the data, but we didn't use it because it need time to clean it. Because there are more than 4 million Herbarium records.
Yes, I agree with you that I think that for most of the data, the GPS, particularly the GPS information, was hidden in the database, so we cannot use it directly like the GBIF. And so another question associated with this is that I know there are a lot of database with people called the citizen science. Sorry, like the Unnaturalist. So I think the data in the Unnaturalist can be used directly. So maybe that one you can consider it in the future, because you said maybe in the one of the direction in the future we should consider the completeness of the data.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Also a good question. To use the citizen science data to supplement those structured database. We actually tried once. We tried the tweeters. We're trying to mine tweeters for species records, and we completed the procedure, the protocol. We built a protocol, but the problem is to get the Twitter records because now you can only get 14 days, and if you want more, you have to buy it. As you see, the iLiterature it's I know it's a citizen science program developed by some people in the US or some Europe. Yeah, the only problem is they are not structured data, so they're allowed to put in the format as GBIF, and also you have to do lots of validation because sometimes you have to compare the pictures with the name they put on the pictures. Sometimes they are not exactly match each other. So it takes lots of work, but certainly it's a data source that worth to dig into it.
Okay, and the last question, sorry. And that you mentioned that you identify some endangered and threatened species in the city. So I'm wondering if all these species are native to the city, or some of them are cultivated by people outside of the city from.
Okay, so I have to explain. When we look at the endangered and critically endangered species, we are looking at those records that is occurred in the nature areas, and also we check the origin of the species to make sure that it's originally from this country or this region. So we don't look at the endangered species in city. We just look at those originally recorded in nature areas.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Good questions. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's one question from our audience, like in the chat box. So he want to ask, what's the dynamics on forest structure under urbanization impact? That's a very big question.
So good question, but we haven't looked at the forest dynamics. Basically, we only look at urbanization at this stage, and only treat forest as a type of land cover. So it's a good question, but I need some foresters to work together to answer it.
Okay, is there more questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, please go on.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Yang. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I just have a question about the second part. Your second part on the impacts on species surrounding the developed area. I noticed that you I'm not sure is my understanding right. I noticed the time is three part, the current, the 2050, 2070. Is that right?
Yes.
You can make a prediction for the tree species under the impact of urban expansion. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't explain that part clearly. So for that future projections, we want to find out, the suitability of this place for the particular species in the future climate. So often you can find the papers that says, well, they find tree species or plant species in the wild that are escaped from the gardens or parks. But the problem is, can those species sustain themselves in the wild? Sometimes they just release into the wild, but they cannot establish themselves and build up a viable population, and they will disappear later. So we want to make sure if we see that the city introduce species into the wild, this species can exist now and also can exist in the future. So that's the reason we do this, projections, use the future climate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
And I also have a question about the about your data set. I noticed that you get the location geographical coordinates from the literature of this tree species. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And do you use Google API to get use the geocoding to we get the address of the species, and then we use geocoding to get the geographical coordinates, XY coordinates. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, you're right. We don't use Google, we use GeoLinks because we don't have good access to Google here. So.
Okay, understand. And I've noticed that in some API, they use different coordinates, and they have a shift from the origin locations. So maybe maybe 300 cell size is very it's not easy. So it's a very wonderful work.
Yeah, you're right. I think for most of those records, if we use geocoding to derive the coordinates from the place names, we cannot assure they have a very high accuracy of the geographic locations. We can only use that at the city scale. So we see, well, this city here, this is a central coordinates like this. Good observation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think maybe we have time for another 2 questions. Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you, Reniel.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much for your very interesting and informative talk. So indeed, it's a very inspiring work, really. So actually, I have a very general question. So what are the methods or what are the approaches so that we can have to increase the urban tree cover? I mean, rather than just planting trees here and there. So just using a conventional method to increase the trees in urban cities. Do we have any new approach, new kind of the method to increase the urban tree cover and also conserve the existing tree cover in a particular cities or urban area? So what is your opinion?
Well, this is a question not quite related to my today's topic, but it's certainly something I'm doing for most of my research.
Okay.
So to increase urban tree cover, I think there is no one size fits all answers. But mostly based on my observation, it depends on the local people. It's really, no matter it's a program initiated by the government or it's like a community initiated program. If the local people don't support it and help to sustain those urban trees, it will not last. So if we can get people involved to help plant and help protect and maintain those trees, that's probably the only way to keep the long-term sustainability of the urban canopy cover, and also maybe increase it if you have the financial and other resources. So I know this is not a good answer to your question, but that's my personal observation.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there more questions? Okay. If not the case, maybe Professor Wang, do you want to say something?
I just want to thank you for Dr. Yang for your excellent talk. And also I thank you for all those participants today. In the one time we have 80 participants for today. It's quite amazing number. So I thank you for everybody. Have a good evening and a good days in Asia. So thank you, Dr. Yang. Thank you again. I probably will see you soon this week or next week, right? In one of my lecture.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Gordon, and thank you, Susie, for inviting me.
Yeah,
and thank everybody. And I'm looking forward to communicate or collaborate with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Fan. Thank you, Professor Yang. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So I hope everyone enjoyed the talk. So we will see you next time. Thank you. Thank you.